Perfect, thanks a lot. This video is sponsored by MPB. Cheers. Oh. Was it supposed to do that? Hello everybody. I'm not sure about this. I didn't think I was scared of heights, but this does feel a bit, I don't know, jittery. Anyway, welcome to what is, as near as makes no difference, my hometown, Llandudno. I live about 5 minutes away and I grew up near here as well. And I've never shot here. So today and yesterday, to be fair, I'm doing just that. Shooting with a camera that I shall explain more about. So this is the Great Orme, a giant limestone headland that heads out to sea, as most headlands tend to. Yeah, never been up here to film a video for this channel, I don't think. I've cycled round it a couple of times, but I don't recall ever getting a good photo, so maybe today's the day. You never know. With this, the OM system OM5, and today also marks the start of a new series on this channel, currently untitled, don't know what I'll call it, but basically I'll be spending a day or 2 days with a camera that has intrigued me, and I'll then tell you what I think of it. Doesn't sound like the most original series, that, does it? But hopefully it'll be interesting. Not always new cameras, cameras that, as I say, just intrigue me. And this is certainly one of them, mostly for nostalgia. I had the Olympus OMD EM5, I think it was called, back in 2011, 2012, something like that, and I really loved it. So I was intrigued to try this, which I assume has basically the same form factor, certainly feels like it, but perhaps with some updated technology. I don't know for sure, we'll see. Also, I'm shooting with the 20mm f1.4 Pro. Also, I should say that so far this camera is doing my head in. Small cameras like this, hopefully you can see that it's quite a small camera, it's micro four thirds. I think it should be perfectly possible to operate them exclusively with one hand, which typically I like to do a lot of the time. Sometimes I want to shoot a photo and I'm holding my son's hand. Sometimes, like now, I'm trying to film at the same time as taking a photo. And sometimes I've just got a coffee in my hand or an ice cream. But I think one of the hallmarks or advantages of having such a small, light camera should be that it's perfectly possible to operate with one hand. And this camera, you can't really do it for a couple of reasons. Firstly, the on-off switch is on the left-hand side of the camera, which to me makes absolutely no sense. And so if you wanted to turn it off and on with your right hand while you're holding the camera, you'd have to do something like this and then shuffle your hand back over. Bit of a pain. And secondly, there's no joystick, which is not necessarily the end of the world because you can use the screen, which is currently tucked away, but you can use the screen to focus. But if you don't want to do that, you've got to use this four-way pad thing. And the trouble with a four-way pad is that you have to keep removing your thumb to move in a different direction. And that, of course, means that you can't use your thumb to keep pressure on the camera, which means that you end up dropping the camera. So, yeah, not ideal trying to use this camera one-handed, which I think is a great shame. One of several reasons that I sold my Leica M11, that not been able to operate one-handed. That was for entirely different reasons. Obviously it was a manual focus only camera. Try doing that with one hand. But unforgivable with a camera of this size. That's my opinion. I've removed myself from the pier, as you can probably tell. Way too loud. I was only on there about 10 minutes and I heard "Come on Eileen" twice, which is too much. But I don't know if you can see at the end of the pier, there's a steam paddler, I believe it's called, the last seagoing one in the world. And it sets off from the pier in about 10 minutes. So I thought I'd hang around, try and get a decent photo. But not from the pier, too loud for me. Hopefully I can find sort of semi-interesting foreground. Let's go and have a look. Well, welcome to what is now day 3 in this first video of a new series of mine that I think I'm going to call One Day With a Specific Camera. So not off to the smoothest of starts, but it turns out that only having one battery is a bit of a pain, particularly when it's a small battery, because it keeps running out, even if I do try and charge it on the fly, because it only came with a USB-B cable. So it doesn't recharge all that quickly, and inevitably I run out of battery long before I want to. Hence why I'm out again, this time on the west shore of the town, which is definitely much more of a sunset location, and I'm here at 9:45 in the morning. Never mind. I'm really enjoying photos at the moment that sort of hint at things, and that's quite a simple but good example of that. There's sand, there's a life, what do you call those, a life ring? But you don't see the sea. You get hints that the sea is around, but you don't actually see it. And I like that. Yeah. Well, this power button is still winding me up. And I was thinking last night, actually, I don't recall this being an issue on the camera that I had 11 or 12 years ago. And obviously it was a few versions earlier than this one, but the power button was on the right hand side of the camera. Admittedly, still in a bit of an odd position, but at least you could turn it on with your right hand thumb. And I think I've made my point with this. I don't want to keep banging on about it, but I do think it's unforgivable for a modern camera to have a power button that's not in the same postcode as the shutter button. Because in my book, you should be able to power on a camera, take a quick photo, turn off the camera, in the simplest way possible. And if the power button's not near the shutter button, well, you're going to have a problem doing that. I won't mention it again, but it is odd. Right, it's time for me to go home. Not least because the battery is flashing at me again. And the battery's not great, but it's not that bad. I've only taken about 20 shots this morning, so I must not have charged it right. Which is a shame, but the light's going away now, and this camera is being collected today, so I'd have to leave anyway. Some thoughts on this camera. Power button aside, and we will put that to one side, and the focusing, I've just been focusing and then recomposing so that I don't have to play around with the 4-way pad or the touchscreen. I think it's quite an engaging camera. I quite like it, and it does remind me of the camera that I loved all those years ago. Micro Four Thirds though is in a tricky spot, I think, in some senses, and I talked about this last year when I was talking about the G9 Mark II. This lens I love, 20mm f1.4. The problem that it's got is that if you look at something like the Sony 40mm, a lens that I absolutely love, and if you were to pair that with, say, an A7C, a Sony A7C, there aren't really any weight and size savings shooting Micro Four Thirds. In fact, that lens I think is smaller than this 20mm. And so, as I talked about in that video a few months ago, I don't know how many cases there are now where Micro Four Thirds makes sense. I think in terms of things like wildlife, obviously that's different. You can still be shooting very long lenses that are much smaller when you're doing so on Micro Four Thirds. But yeah, for stuff like this, I'm not so sure. Now styling, I really like this camera. I think it looks great. I would go for a black one if you're interested in it, because lots and lots of people notice this. Obviously it's quite a retro looking thing, and it being silver just adds to the fact that people notice it because it looks a bit unusual by modern standards. And if you want to be noticed, if you want people looking at your camera, that's fantastic. If you don't, then it's something to be aware of, and I'd go for a black one. and a second battery.
Right, look at this. The power button is collared around the shut button on this camera. Very common design, brilliant design. It's the same on this camera, a little bit different on this camera, but the power switch is still very close to the shutter. I will shut up about it now, but yes, I found it quite frustrating. Anyway, thank you for watching the first video in this series, and do let me know if you can think of anything that would improve future videos in this series, including cameras that you might like me to feature. I've got a list of cameras in my mind, but it would be useful to know what you think too. And I suspect, regardless of what it is, most of the cameras I feature will come from the sponsor of today's video, MPB. Now, if you've not heard of or used MPB before, I think basically they are the place to both buy and sell used camera gear online. They have thousands of pieces of gear at any one time available, with power switches in all kinds of places, I suspect, but more often than not in the correct place. And regardless of what it is you're after, you could save hundreds, if not thousands, by buying used on MPB. And you can do so safe in the knowledge that every single piece of kit on the MPB site has been checked thoroughly by experts before being placed on the site. And on top of that, everything comes with a 6-month warranty. Conversely, if you've got stuff gathering dust, cameras or lenses, whatever it might be, and you want to turn that into cash, then I'd highly recommend selling on MPB as well. In my experience, selling camera gear can be a little bit of a faff. You've got to deal with negotiation, the fees, couriers, insurance. It's a bit of a pain, and MPB makes the process very simple. You can get a quote online pretty much instantly. Then if you're happy with that quote for your gear, they will arrange for a courier to come to your house to collect it, and then once they receive it, they'll assess it and then confirm your quote. If you're still happy with the quote, then you can get paid very quickly. It's seamless and I love it. And so whether you're looking to expand or contract your kit, definitely check out MPB first. I can't recommend them enough. And yes, I look forward to seeing your suggestions on what other stuff I should feature in this series. I bet there are loads of comments about how you don't need to turn the camera on and off. You can just leave it in standby and that's fine. And while that's true, when you only have one battery, you do even need to be cautious about standby. The solution is to get another battery, but you shouldn't have to leave it on standby. It should just be in the right place. I'll let you go. I'll see you next week. I will just continue raving about this on my own.